benefit from capitalism?
Really? Nobody. Only the rich benefit from capitalism. Capitalism being the control of a state apparatus or a nation, government, state, whatever word you use, by a certain class. So if rich people are that class and they control that state apparatus, the government, that nation, of course they're the ones to benefit from it. Talk to the abyss. It seems like a TikTok. Do you guys disagree?
Yeah. You want me to explain why first before you go?
Yeah, hit me.
So I'm a Marxist, so I believe that society, through class struggles, transitions through different epochs or different modes of production or different economic systems. So I believe that the Civil War was a revolutionary war in America that transitioned us out of the slave-based mode of production in the antebellum South into capitalism. I believe that capitalism is a superior economic system to slavery. In Europe, I believe capitalism was in many ways a superior economic system to feudalism. But I would argue and agree that capitalism is better for everybody than, say, slavery.
Like, you can still rise from the bottom with capitalism, and that's most societies. So it's like this possible for, the less wealthy to climb to the top if they have a good idea or like innovate on something that they think is a good concept.
We're talking about benefits, right? No, I see both your points. Definition, I know, now I'm being antithetical. I was telling you not to give you a definition. Now I'm about to give you a definition of capitalism.
We should establish definitions of things we're talking about.
Yeah, we gotta be on the same page about basic definitions.
I feel like when it comes to science and ideology, it just gets kind of messy. I feel like it's just so much easier to do logical,
well, I mean, if you cite a definition, I'll accept whatever you give me. I don't know about these guys.
Nah, this is a trap. Hold on, let me finish this. My idea of capitalism, I very much look at it within, again, very material, very cemented the idea of who has control over the military, judicial, legislative arm of a nation or a state. For an episode about capitalism and communism, we have not talked about class. Whatever class has control within that nation. And now capitalism would be the rich, the bourgeoisie, the job creators, having complete control within that society. Of course that would only benefit rich people. Of course you're gonna push for tax cuts. Of course you're never gonna talk about livable wage, you'll talk about minimum wage, just harm reduction.
It's a tricky one. I'm not sure there's ever a time when wealth doesn't concentrate up, including Stalin.
Yeah, so all of that was really, really good. I think part of the reason there was some confusion there, and maybe they didn't even include it in the video. It looks like they cut out so much, and I really wish they didn't do that. But it could have been something about the effect of, like, how, for example, like, according to a Marxist analysis such as, like, myself, right, there are things such as, like, the labor aristocracy, for example, which are, like, a kind of working class which benefit from the exploits of the ruling class, the bourgeoisie, in some shape, way, or form, right? So, for example, like a good example of this would be like a back during slavery times, right? With Black Americans being enslaved in mass, right? These basically like these white workers who would like patrol the fields and like whip slaves who weren't working hard enough, right? Those people, for example, are examples of labor aristocrats, right? Because they benefit from the economic mode of production that is slavery, despite being, of course, oppressed under it, right? How are they oppressed under it? Because they're still working. They're still working in a faulty economy. That these aren't people. While maybe like I don't even know what the names of these people are. These like slave abusers, right? These slave abusers might be like nepotism babies, right? For the slave masters or like the plantation owners, right? But for the most part, like they're also like working people, right? And they're probably not living these super lavish lives, right? But it's still better than compared to slaves, right? Because I mean, Jesus Christ, like Black Americans, like Jesus Christ, I mean, it's unbelievable the stuff that they had to deal with. So when we think of these things about labor aristocrats, right, it's this concept of like there are people who work or who work on behalf of or for the benefit of the empire, the state, the corporations, despite also being working class people, right? The oppressor would not be so strong if they did not have those amongst the oppressed who supported them, right? So that's how you kind of get this idea where there's like this confusion, and they didn't even include it in the video at all, which is super weird. Like this is really weird how the video got edited here. But regardless, that's kind of like what the deal is with that. So that, when we say that only the rich benefit from it, like, yes, that is true. But to some extent, that's kind of where the waters start to muddy, right? And that's when Walumbo talks about we need to talk about class, right? Because that hasn't been brought up at all. And maybe he did bring it up more, but like they cut it out. Like, I don't even know what happened. Class is like the central fucking analysis to Marxism in general. Like, it's this entire concept that's critical and pivotal to like our understanding and scientific reasoning of what this is all about. So when it's completely removed from discussions of capitalism, for example, right, because capitalism, fascism, stuff like that naturally promotes class collaborationism, right, which doesn't actually get rid of the classes, but just kind of coalesces them and forces them to capitulate to the state and the corporations and compete against one another, a whole litany of things, really. So when we talk about class struggle, right, it's this idea of like there are differing economic classes in society who are struggling for power, right? So like the professional managerial class, the labor aristocrats, right? Like they have, economic interests that align more with the bourgeoisie than they do with working class people, right? And that's how this paradigm exists, because their sliver of wealth, right? Their kind of sliver of goodness, right? This like good enough living, and sometimes it is like lavish living. Sometimes it is like, they're living above a sustainable means, right? But even then, right? It's just not. It's just not a good. It's inherently exploitative. It's not equal. It's not. It's causing all of these imbalances in class that are critical to the analysis of capitalism. That's being completely removed here. So let's see what Ty Lopez is about to tell us and what nonsense is about to come out of his mouth. But we'll see. He said something about wealth concentrating towards the top. Like, none of these people were wealthy. The thing with, like, Stalin was not wealthy. Mao was not wealthy. Pol Pot was a CIA, Khmer Rouge. Like the United States funded and supplied Pol Pot. Like, that's what all that. No communist is like, oh boy, I love Pol Pot. Like, none of them. Nobody. And so it's just, he didn't even like check his facts, man. He's just saying nonsense, and you can see the uncertainty in his face as well. But I guess here we go, right? So let's go on, shall we?
Mao Zedong, Pol Pot. It's all Castro. You don't think Castro was a rich man who was benefited from the Cuban system?
Didn't he have almost $1 billion when he died?
But I want to interject real fast, because unlike Cam, I won't just accept definitions. So when we talk about capitalism, that's fine, that's your definition. But for most people, when we say capitalism, what we mean is the free exchange and selling and buying of goods, right? And the more you have of that, the more freedom you have in those decisions, the less the government's involved in that, the more capitalism you have. And as we have
Yeah, so the reason that she's wrong is because her definition literally is trade, right? Like the buying and trading and selling of goods, like she says, uses trade in it, but she's describing trade. This is that's not like what capitalism is, right? And when she says like we can have different definitions, that's not really fine, because we're all operating from a different understanding of what it actually is, right? We could have a discussion about what it's supposed to be, what it claims to be, right? But when we talk about what it actually is, right, when it claims to be this like free market of openly, buying and selling, trading goods, right? Like that's just like commerce. Like that's literally just the concept of commerce. Like what separates capitalism is this idea of like having wealth concentrated, the natural concentration of wealth because of the system, a working class and a bourgeoisie, like these like investors, these tycoons, right? And in a unique form of exploitation that's different from previous modes of production, say for example slavery or feudalism, right? That's why, like what they gave, especially like Eddie and Malumbo, like I mean, hell, even Bunny did too. Like they all gave decent like explanations of what it is, right? But then, idealism can just run amok and run away and like make whatever sense it wants to of it, without having any accountability to it, right? And that's what kind of with these debates and discussions, like there's no moderation, there's no accountability, like things just go awry naturally. So I guess we'll see what more is about to happen here, but it just, I don't know, man. It just seems like a BS fest in every way. And it seems like any of the explanations that, you know, my side, the communist side, could be giving is being cut out or not given extensive like attention or whatever it is. I guess we'll continue, right?
We have seen capitalism expand across the world over the past 30, 40, 50 years. We have seen an 80% reduction in world poverty since 1990 alone.
Hey, can someone tell me what country that is that's been reducing so much world poverty? Can someone tell me what that is? You know, I'm gonna imagine that most of us can kind of figure out what it is. And last time I checked, the ideology, the proclaimed ideology of said nation was nowhere near capitalist. Just goes back to show, you know, like how we're mixing up definition, right? Like the United States is not capitalist, but China is, right? That's what happens when you just let what no theory does to an MFer, right? And so, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, if you actually take out China from the graph, world poverty seems to be going up, if I'm not mistaken. So the level of which like China is single-handedly controlling that graph is, you know, yet again, right? Because like these capitalists, these pro-capitalists, they're not even capitalists. They're just simps for capitalism. They do all this research beforehand, but it's all NGOs, you know, Western corporation-run newspapers, think tanks, Western government websites, right? Nothing that's like actual information from these governments or these nations or the people that are living in these other places, which, you know, allows for all kinds of statistics to be, you know, messed up with, as I've mentioned in the previous parts of the video as well. I guess we'll see what happens next, though.
Alone. It was cut in half between 1990 and 2010. That's miraculous. We have also seen a 40% reduction in child labor. We have seen the mortality rate for children cut in half. We've seen the maternal mortality rate fall by like 43%.
Yeah, I mean, child labor is making a return in the United States. The United States is one of the highest infant mortality and maternal mortality. Like, is it maternal mortality? Is that how it, like women who are in pregnancy and die from that? We have the highest rate of that as well. And all of these, like all of that progress is not being done by capitalists. Like the reason those things were problems is because they were capitalists, because it's within their economic interest to just pursue the profit, as we addressed, to pursue as much money as possible as per the profit motive. As we addressed earlier in the video, right, as Bunny addressed, right, like there's a profit motive incentive for employers not to hire women because they might get pregnant and they might need leave, and like, you know, they have like periods, for example, that, I mean, women should not have to work on their period, but that's a whole nother fucking discussion for another day. It's just insane. Like it's just like all these little numbers and points and stuff like that. And you can see, right? Like, you know, it's sad that if I look in the comments, like it's going to be all of these like bots or just like monkeys who don't actually use critical thinking, just like saying a bunch of bullshit. Because if you actually watch what's happening, it's like 3 communists who are trying to have a reasonable discussion, and then 3 brick walls who have like all this nonsense and stupidity in it. And that's super obvious if you're like any degree of emotional intelligence at all, right? And that's just that way of looking at it. That's not even addressing at all the actual arguments and presentation, you know, and the merit of what's being said. It's, there's so much BS in these Jubilee videos. It's really embarrassing, man. And yeah, all of this progress that she's putting out was not done by capitalists, man. These were leftists and socialists and activists and the resistance fighting against the oppressors to, you know, get these rights. So it's yet again just like more lying, more whitewashing, more nonsense.
Fewer hours. It blows my mind that somebody could say only the rich benefit from capitalism.
What evidence do you have that
Capitalism has
that's capitalism
because these are
incentivizing, not China's
because
poverty
we're
alleviation
measuring-
programs or the Belt and Road
Because we're
Initiative?
measuring as capitalism has moved into various countries, and we're looking at their poverty rates and their hunger rates, by the way, get cut. As more and more socialist and communist countries have fallen, which, by the way, we're down to only 5 at this point because most people are turning against it. As that has happened largely since 1993, we've seen more countries become democracies, more countries implement capitalism, and yes, sometimes it's
That's
mixed,
right, when
like
China
the U.S.
implemented
or the
the Belt and
democratic
Road
socialism.
in their poverty.
Yeah, I mean, now she's just like spewing nonsense. Now it's like a Ben Shapiro strategy of like, how much can I just talk and say things? Like, what's a hunger rate, for example? Does she mean like the dying of starvation rate? Is that what she's like? And she's also wrong about so many people like walking away from the ideology, right? In America alone, socialism has the highest favorability rating of like out of any generation. Gen Z does, and millennials. In any point of American history, it has never had the level of popularity it has had now, with the height of information that we have, and with one of the and during one of the worst economic crises and economic, like moments of economic inequality in our country's history. There's just so much BS being said, and you have to like go through every little thing, and none of it's true. Yeah, so I guess we'll see what Eddie's about to say.
Poverty alleviation programs, though. So what
That's when
evidence
they
do you
did
have
what?
that that's not having an effect?
That's when they did what?
Launched their poverty alleviation programs in the Belt and Road Initiative, which are intended to build up industrialization in countries who have been prevented from advancing their productive forces by imperialism, economic sanctions, and the U.S.-dominated financial system that emerged after World War II, where the IMF and the World Bank can basically decide whoever they want to give financing to. So like when Chile went socialist under Salvador Allende, Richard Nixon famously said, "Make the economy scream," and the IMF and World Bank went from giving them $200 million in funding a year to $2 million.
Why do communist countries always have to?
Yeah, I mean, nothing to really add there. We're about to see what Hannah's question here is about to go to, but nothing to really add there. Yeah, I mean, that was really succinctly said. Really well done by Eddie. So no comments here. I'm not even sure why I stopped the video. My bad.
Depend on capitalist countries to succeed. Anytime they don't, it's because there was an embargo or they weren't giving them money. I don't hear us saying that about North Korea.
The Congo is.
Yeah, I mean, they're just revealing that they don't know anything, right? Because North Korea has been under some of the most brutal sanctions we've ever seen in world history. Same thing with Cuba, right? These countries, same thing with China during Mao's period of communism as well. The United States used war to concentrate, the United States and Western nations used war and imperialism to extract resources and gain hegemony across the world so that they could stranglehold any nation that has, as like Chile, for example, as Eddie pointed out, that's like seeking to, democratically elect like socialist politicians and a socialist government. Like these are not regimes, or like in the way that the United States is, that they won't ever admit. These are democracies, the actual democracies, and it's completely unthinkable to these Americans. And they're just kind of revealing how much they don't actually know, which is sad. But it just kind of goes to show that, this isn't even, this is actually a discussion about like a lack of information. And a lot about what Eddie was explaining too at the IMF, probably went over their heads a lot because, we're just operating in like a completely different world. And these things all need to be like explained and understood it properly. But everything just becomes like a dick measuring contest with these arguments. So it completely loses its footing.
Is capitalist. The Congo is one of the poorest countries in the world. The Congo, though, is mineral rich. So much cobalt. Every single one of your folds needs cobalt to work. That is your real life vibranium. Capitalism has not helped the Congo. The disorder within the country benefits the capitalists at home. And
When
that's
you
the
say they're
democracy.
capitalists, what do you mean that the Congo is capitalist?
Well, you better
because
watch.
your definition is
if
not
you're
mine.
African, you know who the new colonizers are? China. Who's extracting resources out of Africa?
Ty, I love you. Terrible argument with me. Great with
Boy,
great
you
with
can't
the
just
other
say
type
it's
of guys,
but just
but not
because
with
you
me.
say it's terrible
But-
doesn't mean it's
To be
terrible.
clear,
That's just the
I wouldn't accept your definition of capitalism, but I will obviously accept your definition of socialism. That's what I meant. Like, obviously,
Why?
I know what I think capitalism
Wait, what
is.
was
so
that?
my definition of
Just
socialism.
so I know,
Or
why is
communism,
China?
whatever.
Why do we think? Are you making the stance that supposed altruistic / centrally governed China is not a new capitalistic empire moving into Dubai? You see it there. Moving into Africa,
China is not America. There are clear differences in
with
what
that.
America does in the Congo versus what China does. America comes in, they set up military bases. Unmarked airplanes will come into the Congo with multitudes of American military and multiple corporations. You know what China does? They come in with intellectuals, with a document signing. Would you guys like to do this trade deal? If you do this, we'll build a mining facility that the state can run and that will benefit your taxes. And you know what the Congo will say? They'll say no. And you know what China will do? They make a new deal. You know what happens when you say no to America?
And how does that capitalism
and the
fall?
law.
Again, that has nothing to do with capitalism's
very
fault.
long tirade.
Yeah, I mean, the double standard at it again, right? Where it's like, you know, if there's poor planning, if like, you know, if a nation's under constant sanctions, you know, it's still bad, socialism bad, how could it not develop? You know, if a socialist nation asks for help from another nation, in the same way that they've provided nations to capitalists that are all the time, you know, it's like, why do you guys always need help all the time? How is that capitalist? Because it's capital motivated. The American government receives, you know, they have financial motivation to do such things. As Malumbo pointed out, it's a the Congo specifically is a mineral-rich nation, despite being one of the poorest on the earth. And the reason that it's so poor, right, because Hannah's like, how is that capitalist? It's been trying to develop itself like as an independent nation for forever. But capitalist countries keep showing up to take all of their stuff and screw over the Congolese people like in big time. We're like King Leopold's era with the Netherlands, I think it was. That alone, like taking a bunch of rubber, like at least over 1 million Congolese died, like at least over. Like they would cut off hands of children if they didn't meet quota, like all of that's for the profit motive. And as Malumbo pointed out, right, like China brings in a deal, right? They even if the Congolese government say no, they just make a different deal and ask them again, right? And again, those are communist nations. They're communist, like Cuba has one of the highest rates of doctors like per like 100,000 people in the world, like by far, despite being under constant sanctions, constantly having to deal with the United States at its, you know, right at its doorstep, screwing with things as much as possible. So, you know, like that development doesn't get to take credit for like communism, socialism at all, right? Because that's like actually capitalism, because they release the sanction. You just can't win. There's no winning with these arguments.
There is no perfect economic model.
There's no disagreeer there.
I mean, sorry to just start already. One of the main misconceptions about communists is that we want to establish a utopia. And one of the foundational communist texts is Friedrich Engels' Socialism, Utopian and Scientific, where he criticizes these utopian socialists who are saying, overnight we're going to create this perfect society. He says it's not possible. You can only build a better society out of the one you currently have. So we have to take what we currently have as far as a socioeconomic structure and figure out how we can build something better out of that. But it's never going to be utopian. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be corruption that needs to be combated. We just want to build a system that's more rational and based on fulfilling human needs and human flourishing rather than simply profit.
So I think we would agree from capitalism's side that there's no perfect system because there are scarcity of resources. And again, I think you are always up against human nature, which has a lot of corruption, which has a lot of selfishness, a lot of self-interest. Why I like capitalism is that I think it's a system that acknowledges that and says, how do we restrain those impulses within people? How do we create a system where in order for you to get what you want, in order for you to get your needs met, or in order for you to get rich, you have to provide some kind of value for other people. And so that is what instigates productivity. That is why we see such large innovation gains. We've seen such big technological gains under capitalism. There's still going to be problems. I don't think there's any way to say we will never have people who are poor, we will never have corruption. But I think capitalism does the best job of taking what we're dealing with and trying to make it operate in a system where people are civil to one another and there's natural cooperation within it.
When people say a perfect economic system, it's like saying, what's the perfect science? Communism, Marxist-Leninism is a science. What is the most rational way to organize a society to make sure that it can actually see a future.
And if you read the debates within the Chinese Communist Party, they are constantly going, Stalin did this was right, this was wrong. You know, Cuba did this, Tito's Yugoslavia did this was right, this was wrong. They're constantly learning and experimenting.
Stalin wasn't open to too much ideas.
But we're in 2023.
No, but let's talk about the modern countries though, because
Yeah, I mean, all great stuff from the left side, or like, you know, the communist side. Yeah, you know, it's weird because I mean, Hannah said all that stuff, but there's like all kinds of arguments that are wrong with there, right? Like, their capitalism, for example, cannot guarantee full employment because, I mean, as she said, you have to offer something valuable. So if you're not valuable, well, I guess you're dead then. Like, they don't address that at all in the video. There's no talking about it. There's no addressing, like, at all with it. And this is why all the blurring lines is so ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, you know, complaining about, like, Stalin didn't like ideas, which, again, is not true, and it's reductive. It's just all nonsense. It's so... There's, like, a level at which it's like, almost pointless to engage with it because it's so wrong and so completely misconstrued. But, I mean, the best way of saying that, right, is, like, it's, you know, I mean, it's 2024 now, but this was last year. You know, Stalin's dead. Let's move on, right? And even if that was not the case, right, the Chinese Communist Party, for example, right, like, they're constantly looking at what all kinds of leaders in the past did wrong to see what they could do better.
within the actual communist countries right now, you literally have people going swimming with sharks to escape them. You don't see that happening in capitalist countries, period. One, because you don't have to. We just let people leave when they want to. So that's a big part of it. But two, it's because people know what's better for them, and they are getting out of communist countries in droves when they can. The 2 out of the 5 top countries that are trying to immigrate here right now are Cuba and Venezuela. People are starving under these systems, and so if you're a pragmatic person, you have to look at communism's track record, where it has killed millions of people. It is the leading cause of ideological death in the 20th century, and at some point you have to acknowledge that I care about people, I want what's best for them, but this isn't doing it. This isn't working. They also won't let you have a free press in any of these countries. They literally have a government-controlled press.
My TikTok's been banned 7 times after
Mine's
the
been
U.S.
7 days.
Yeah, so there's no free press here
U.S. government's
either.
not running TikTok. It's still China.
You're wrong. You're wrong. The U.S. government forced TikTok to hand over American servers to a company in Texas called Oracle, who proceeded to hire a bunch of U.S. State Department operatives and NATO operatives, and that's when we got banned. So
And
it's
that's
not.
why I can't talk
it's
about
no
mobile
longer.
He's got him.
It's
He's
no
got him.
longer run by
He's gone.
China.
It's almost gone. It's almost gone.
I'm just saying there's no freedom of press in the U.S. either.
There is freedom of the press.
What does freedom mean in a country that imprisons the most people in the world?
That's a great question. Superimposed to
What-
it. It means that the
what-
government is too big. There's too many laws. We make things that are nonviolent
So
that have
the US
nothing
is
to do.
communist.
Listen, if I'm a capitalist, I want to protect people's person and their property. Those are the only laws that
If
should
you're
exist.
a capitalist, you protect the
And if you
protect
violate those
property
two
and
things-
property.
No,
Profit
people's
and property.
personhood and
Nobody's
their property.
protecting
Individual liberty
profit,
is
dude.
essential under capitalism.
What are tax cuts?
You pay everything that you're supposed to, and then they give you money back.
So you have more
So they-
money if there's a tax cut, right? You have more money if
You
you
have
a tax
more
cut.
of your money that they took that comes back to you.
Okay, so with those tax cuts that just happened, who has more of their money?
What do you mean, who has more of their
Come on,
money?
man.
No, I will
What
spell it
class
out for me.
I got you. Which people gets to keep more of their money? Who?
Well,
Not
I
all of us.
presume it's
not
the
we,
people
it's-
making more money, obviously.
Who makes the most
If
profit?
there's a tax rate and you make more money, you're obviously going to pay more money, and if you get a tax cut, you're going to get more back because
Are
you
you
made more
referring to
money.
like
that
Trump
possible?
only
Like, that's
giving
absurd.
like tax cuts for the rich or something like that? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, as a socialist, I'm not really here to argue for taxes. I'm more to argue for worker ownership of the means of production. But I think Bunny wanted to go.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. So I guess hypothetically in capitalism, you have free market, correct? So when free market occurs, it goes to near zero profit, correct?
When a free market occurs, it
In a
goes to
free
zero
market,
profit?
the equilibrium point is near zero profit because they'll keep undercutting each other until they maximize demand.
Why would they work or do anything?
She's talking about the business side.
I'm talking about
classic
like,
economics.
Yeah, classic economics. But let's say hypothetically, like Amazon is a prime example. They keep pricing, like I guess, like earning less and less profit. So wouldn't that create monopolies? And I mean, that's how you want to get more demand, right?
But okay, so first of all, like capitalists are going to be generally against like trusts and monopolies, but all.
Man, oh man. Yeah, I mean, at least we're getting to a point in the video where it's like the tolerance for BS is really starting to kind of fall through with the socialist and communist side, right? Because there are so many, like it would. it's people, people are not special enough, especially pro-capitalists, to sit there and like let them spew whatever nonsense they want and go through every argument and disprove it. Like, that's just ridiculous. And I think even the ways that like Eddie Malumbo and Bunny are trying to like explain the issues with it, like it's just completely outside their comprehension, because they're not operating from a material understanding. They didn't actually reason themselves into these ideas. They may use reasons to justify it, but they didn't actually they just believed it was the status quo. So using reason to get them out of it, even though they've been weaponizing reason, is actually pointless. They can just say all this nonsense, right? Like bringing up this point about monopolies, right? It makes perfect sense, right? The falling rate of profit, which is like saying that capitalists don't want trust and monopoly. Like how can you be so wrong? Like how can you be talking about your own side and be so wrong? Like just not, you're like lying on the spot. You're not like nobody, like this is what happens when people can just say stuff, right? Because what capitalist do you know that does not like monopolies and trust? Especially, even though like Teddy Roosevelt tried passing antitrust laws during his administration, just by being a bloodthirsty imperialist, those like laws and legislations were overturned over the next few decades by the wealthy, because they had so much economic power that they could weaken the government by bribing off politicians, which again, like Hannah mentioned earlier, like using the government to step in and make sure things aren't, but then it's like, okay, but the government being in things is bad because, there needs to be a freer market, but then you give the freer market and that's how monopolies show up. And like, we can't even have these discussions about how all of these contradictions in capitalism exist without dealing with all of this idealist understanding and quote unquote analysis from the pro-capitalist side. It's just insane. Like this is so tiresome. The U.S. government state intelligence agencies have done an excellent job of just like making the public is so dumb, just so dumb, in a way that it's actually impossible to have a conversation with these people. And it just goes to show again how much this format, how many problems this format has as well.
Like
But
at the
it
same time,
creates
like how
Every
could
time.
no,
Yeah.
it does not every time. How
Or oligopolies.
But
It's
is it-
oligopolies
but is
or
it
monopolies.
Chinese state economy the
how
ultimate
could a
monopoly?
socialist argue? Yeah, exactly. It's rich to men when socialists or communists argue against monopolies, or they use that as a hitting point against capitalists, when like the biggest and most powerful monopoly that you could possibly have is
that's
a
not a
state. Wait,
monopoly.
it is a state-owned monopoly. Yes, it is absolutely a
And
monopoly.
how are you going to
Yeah, I mean, so it's totally cool to have different definitions of communism and socialism, right? But like, it's totally important to like use a completely bullshit and made up definition of monopoly. That's not at all. A monopoly is about markets, about economic control, about businesses consuming other businesses in an amoebic-like fashion. It's specifically about he's like, this is what happens, man. Like, there's no concrete analysis here. There's no material understanding. It's all just BS parroting points, all idealism. There's no actual conversation to be had here. Like, it's all just bullshit. This entire conversation, it's impossible to have a conversation with these people. There's so much ridiculous nonsense completely put into their head. I mean, that monopoly comment alone is like pretty disappointing, right? And it also goes to show that they're grasping at straws, man. Like, they're using all these, like points, but they wouldn't be, getting this kind of defensive if things were actually as secure as they believed. And I don't know. I'm just kind of just like, I'm speechless at how intellectually bankrupt these three pro-capitalists are. It's just so like. Yeah, we like any self-respecting person should not have to debase themselves and listen to this all day. There's this perspective that as like communists and stuff like that, we're supposed to like engage with everybody and try to change their mind. Like, no, man, no. It's 2024. Like, there's 8 billion people on the planet. Times have changed. And we don't need to like act like these people, for example, are worth an iota or a second of our time. If you're going to go around saying stuff that like, yeah, dude, like, when the Chinese government during Mao's time takes up everything, that's a monopoly, but it's also not capitalism, and it's just so much, it's mental illness. Like, this is mental gymnastics and cognitive dissonance gone awry. This is why definitions are so important. This is why boundaries and parameters in the conversation are so important, right? Starting and opening these conversations with what will it take for you to change your opinion or to believe in this and this, right? Like to create conditions where they will actually have to be held accountable, right? Because if you just let people say stuff like this, I feel like I'm making the same criticism the entire video. Like, it's just Jubilee being lazy and letting nonsense go awry, run amok. Yeah.
Break
Because
up
there's no
monopolies without the
competition.
state. What apparatus is going to come in
you
and
don't
break?
actually
And in a lot of these,
Yeah,
can I make one point to it? In
I'm
all
okay
these
with
socialist
antitrust
countries
laws.
like Nicaragua, they're now investing in small business and trying to encourage their civilians to start small businesses and to innovate because they view that as a better alternative than monopoly. And what apparatus do you use to stimulate small business and
But
break up monopolies besides the
There
state?
isn't
And when the
a
state's doing
monopoly
that, it's
in the
not
United
acting
States
as a
aside from
monopoly.
ones the government creates.
So what about maybe in the class struggle, you had, like you said, feudalism, slavery, capitalism. We tried communism. Maybe it's the rise
Let's be clear
of
that slavery
libertarianism.
is part
More
of
libertarian.
capitalism.
No, it's not.
That what is?
Slaves were goods.
No.
Slaves were
That is the
slaves had
government.
owners.
So why
That is
does
It is a next level white woman privilege to tell a black man living in America that slaves were not goods. Like, I feel like everything I'm just talking about is encapsulated in this comment. Like, about definitions, about accountability. Like, slaves are not goods. Like, are you high? Like, really? The entire problem with slavery is because people were property. Like, how? Yeah, again, like, at some point you have to be like, you people are stupid. You don't know what you're talking about, and it's I mean, they have to engage with them because of the what's happening right now. But, like, people don't deserve to just say whatever the hell they want and, like, walk away with it. Like, this is complete bullshit and garbage. This is nonsense. This is disgusting. How do these people consider themselves adults? This is just ridiculous. Slaves are not goods, huh? Wow. And yeah, the comments are like, yeah, dude, look at those stupid commies and their bad arguments. Like, yeah. At some point, you just have to be like, there are people that are too far gone, and you just kind of have to let them rot. This is insane, genuinely.
Government
Hannah.
more than anything intervening in the free exchange of buying and
Why-
selling.
wait.
There are companies,
Wait.
right?
Why
There are
does
slave
slavery
companies. They're
predate
just weren't just
capitalism
people
by
hired
thousands
by
of
the
years?
government.
Yeah.
If it's a part of capitalism, why does it
Right.
predate it by
Let's just
thousands
say-
of
No,
years?
that's
just say
actually a great
facts.
point. I'd
Let's
like
just-
to hear that answered.
Yeah, I mean, they're just like, they're not even bringing up points. Like, they don't know what's happening. So they want to ask questions, but they realize that it would start to show that their side's not legitimate. So everything is like a question that's meant to be like this aggressive takedown when they're trying to answer that. Like, every single communist right now, composed, well-mannered, just trying their best to like convey the ideas, and these unhinged white lunatics dick-riding capitalism with their excessive bougie suits are like literally not allowing the flow of conversation. They're not asking critical questions. They're just reacting. They're just trying to say that. Like, it's animals, which makes perfect sense why they would be defending capitalism. This is, I mean, you can sit there and explain. We can explain how slavery's been around for thousands of years, what that means, how that looks like in this analysis, right? But it's not being held in good faith. It's a bad faith question. And Hannah thinks that's a good point to ask a question that clearly shows Cam doesn't know what the hell he's talking about, or Ty, or this is exhausting. These people are insane. They're not serious. This is ridiculous. And nobody should have to be around these people ever at all. Yeah.
Move on that because it's a hot topic. It's too spicy.
No, it's not
So
too
to hit your
spicy. I
point in
actually want
terms
to wait.
of
I want to respond because you wanted to
monopolies-
make that point. You cannot say.
Hannah, I don't want to argue. I don't wanna
You do want to argue. You wanted to make your point, so let me make it back.
Hannah,
And then you're going to try to say it's too spicy for me. No, I got you. Like, let me respond to you. It is not capitalism coming in and enshrining enslavement. It has been on the books in multiple kinds of countries, multiple economic systems throughout history. And in fact, capitalism is what got rid of it. This country is what turned the tide on that and started pushing back against this centuries-old awful institution. So to say it's
England
capitalism,
did,
I think it's
not America.
honestly offensive. That's ridiculous.
A white woman saying to a black man, saying that's how, like, explaining how slavery happened, like literally explaining what property is, then pearl clutching to claim it's offensive, that it was that capitalism is the reason for slavery, but also capitalism is the reason that slavery ended. And she gets to say that it's offensive. She gets to say that it's offensive. Yeah, I mean, some people just deserve a punch in the face. You know what I'm saying? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, at some point, like, white women just need to get punched in the face, right? But then, like, I'm a maniac. I'm unhinged and uncontrolled, like, right? Like, I'm the crazy one for saying something like that. But then these fucking psychopaths can just run around. I don't, like, I'm speechless right now. This is unbelievable. Like, she's spreading misinformation. She's being racist, and she has no fucking clue about it at all. She's she's doing a narcissist tactic of Darvo, defend and attack, reverse, victim and offend, or whatever the hell it's called. Like you try to bring up something, and then they make it about themselves, they become a bully, but then make themselves a victim. And yeah, like, you can't explain to them that slavery, like capitalism, perpetuated, introduced, and created things like slavery, or like helped, prop up that economy, without them saying that it's offensive. And now they're allowed to be like woke and triggered, right? Now Hannah can be triggered, right? Right? Which again, if the communists said that, they'd be woke and weak, yeah, like, it's this. You can't have conversations about ideas when this is what's happening. You have to be like, Hannah, you're an idiot, and you need to stop talking. Like, that's how you deal with this stuff. Otherwise, she can talk about how it's offensive that people explain how capitalism perpetuated slavery. She's not literally whitewashing history to a black American's face. I'm like this is unbelievable, man. Like, in a healthier society, right? Like, people would have consequences for having these kinds of opinions. Like, you would actually be held accountable. Like, people would, nobody deserves to be like thrown into like a social pariah situation, but like, you deserve social punishment. Some people should not be supported. All opinions are not created equally. They're not all equal. And seeing just how genuinely incapable of critical thinking these three people are is pretty. At no point have I been impressed with any of their capabilities. At no point have they introduced an argument that's been unique or interesting or compelling. It's all the same stuff. Every single time any communist talks with an anti-communist, we hear the same arguments and the same things time and time and time again. I have yet to come across a time when I was like, wow, look at these novel and interesting arguments. It's never happened, ever. Everyone has the same exact criticisms because nobody actually understands it who's an anti-communist. So all they have is all these parroting points and all these ideas that are complete misinformation, and then they spew them out to protect their side that they're not even 100% sure is actually right. They just have all these arguments while not actually knowing anything about communism at all. And yeah, like, I'm just kind of disgusted at this point. Like, she's throwing a fit. Like, no, I got you. Like, oh, you want to argue? Like, make your point. So let me explain to you how capitalism actually ended slavery. And it's offensive. Like, yeah, I mean, she's a child. And you can see it in her face, right? She's like a little girl, desperately trying to portray herself as a mature adult, kind of throw themselves. It's so sad seeing how many people are like this, but nonetheless, it is there. And yeah, I'm just kind of really appalled by just how much typical bougie, pearl clutching, Emmett Till slaying pieces of shit that this demographic tends to so consistently be. Yeah, someone, we need to like start getting more militant about these criticisms, because I don't have time for this. Like, I'm not going to sit around and let this kind of nonsense go on. This is ridiculous. What a sad display of like humanity. What a poor, any person who has any critical thinking skills will see just how embarrassingly pathetic the capitalist side is. And if you aren't coming to that conclusion, I think you need to go talk to someone. I think you need help. This is embarrassing and pathetic in every way, shape, and form.
The purpose of an economy should be to maximize the well-being of the population.
Hey, that was my problem.
No disagree. What happens if no one disagrees?
I knew he'd agree on
There's
this.
no debate.
when I knew we were going to be debating capitalists, I figured none of you would defend monopoly capitalism. You'd be more pro small business, more pro free enterprise. And, you know, you look at our current American system and it's not like ideal. You know, you're not giving it 2 thumbs up. So, yeah, I just think we all agree that we're trying to find the best economic system to promote flourishing among society and the population.
The economic system has the responsibility of taking care of their systems. That's common sense. Shouts out to Thomas Paine.
I mean, yeah.
Seems pretty.
It's kind of self-explanatory at this point. The government should always, or in general, the society should strive to be better and to make lives better for everyone.
But I would say not the government. I think you need smaller. Government seems to mess everything up.
It's never yes or no with you, Ty.
Humans, if you talk about the flourishing, you can still see there's tribes that live more hunter-gatherers. Small. I think smaller's better.
What about a robot? What about an unbiased
family's
robot?
better.
There's an anime called Psycho-Pass.
Yeah.
Which okay,
great
you
show.
guys don't know it?
Hell
Okay,
yeah.
perfect. So I think a centralized brain computer with multiple millions and millions of minds in it might be more efficient. So a bigger government might be more efficient. If we could actually pull it off like Psycho-Pass, I think it would work.
But who programs the big computer?
Well, at some point, AI can think for itself.
But the
I don't know
problem
if
is,
that-
even right now,
we
even
happily
right now with
introduced.
AI development,
Oh, bunny. Talking about AI, talking about these things in a reasonable fashion, talking about policy ideas with Americans in an open format, trying to just casually talk about media in an open format, trying to explain how, we can, trust artificial intelligence. No, they're Americans. They're the dumbest people on the earth. Fact. Statistically proven. No nation enjoys more wealth than we do, and Americans are the dumbest people on earth. No, it's not even close. It's not even close. Nations who have been constantly under the boot of imperialism have significantly higher literacy rates, college education, graduates, right? High school graduation rates, competency and skills for science or math or social studies, right? It's not just the United States. It's capitalist countries as well. They have significantly lower quality of life, significantly lower, significantly less informed populations. Attempting to have that conversation with Americans is it's like trying to explain how a robot could replace Boss Baby's job, and all of these Americans are just boss babies. They're babies. They're Americans. They're not fully fledged adults in the way the rest of the world has had to grow and evolve. Everything here is completely artificially propped up in an unsustainable fashion. Infantilized, narcissistic sociopaths running all around. There's this perception we're just supposed to act like Americans are just these completely innocent, and there's oh my God, they're doing nothing wrong, they're just working people. No, they have so many benefits and so many privileges, and then they say things we should be happy for what we have because of other people around the world. They have it worse, as if those conditions don't exist because of Western nations, because of capitalism. Oh, it's so exhausting. You can't. There's no conversation. They're children. It's I'm just gonna be pressing play, and it's gonna be disappointment. But I guess we'll do it anyways. There's an extent that you can't. The Americans are too stupid to have these conversations. I would regret saying it if it was false, but it's not. So.
though, because the way it starts to gather its information is by absorbing what's already out there.
On the
So they're
internet.
already having so many issues with AI being sexist, being racist, starting to have really toxic views. So I think that it's a nice utopian dream, right? I get your point. But to me, I would never trust anybody or any piece of machinery to come in
But that would be the
and
same with
run our
people.
lives.
That's
And our
realistic,
goal
right?
is to get worker ownership of the means of production and worker control of production. So I actually agree with what you're saying. And one of my buddies, Christopher Halali, is a communist farmer in Virginia, and he lives in a very similar community to you. And you know, he says the same thing. Workers should be able to make these decisions about when to harvest, you know, but they can't do that if all the farmland and all the farming tools and tractors and fertilizers owned by multinational corporations and big agribusiness.
I would like to note that you said control rather than own, and I think that under a capitalist system, workers do control the means of production by using their money as indicators, right? Like the business owners produce things based on the demand that consumers or workers, or the same thing, have.
Our dollar doesn't mean fucking shit.
Our dollar does mean something. It's an indicator for what things are valued at.
But if a central decided, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if the central
They'll do the
government
most
just
efficient,
decides
right?
what it's worth,
No,
like they have no
shortages and
indicator.
surpluses, because price is just a signal of scarcity. It
Wouldn't they
signals,
long-term?
hey, there's
Like,
not
they
as
would
many
think
things as
long-term.
this, so the price is going to go up. Or hey, we've got a surplus of this, so the price is going to come down. It's a signal to people, and it signals scarcity. If you remove that signal, that's why centralized economies fail, because there's
There's
no
no
way of
economic
allocating
calculation.
resources. There's no economic calculation. And then you have the situation where people have to go into the black market to get things that they need. It creates utter chaos. Versus under capitalism, you have this free flow of goods based on the signals that are going out between merchants and purchasers. And it's all very seamless.
I would say that any capitalist would agree that the ability to just quit your job and suffer through the demeaning act of trying to find another one is not a great example of freedom within this country.
Why? I don't understand. It's very easy to quit your job and get another job. Like, it's not difficult.
Why is it demeaning?
Sure. The average person who decides to quit a menial job, who has no access to education to get them a higher paying job, who has no social connection, no cultural connection, no state apparatus helping them in real life, just pure real life. It's not as easy as turn off, turn on.
This leads to another really great example of government intervention that really screws up. You brought up education. Pretty much anyone in the United States can get into college, no matter how terrible your grades were.
expensive, though.
Oh,
not true.
that's great. That really
That's
leads me to my
definitely not
next
true.
point.
It's cheaper in
It is
communist
very
societies.
expensive, but do you know why people are able to go to college despite the fact that it's super expensive? Because the federal government comes in and says, hey, I've got 2 bags of money right here, and I'm willing to give it all to you, even though I know you can't pay it back. And then the colleges say, well, hey guys, it seems when we keep raising our prices, the government just keeps paying it. And we don't even have to worry about if the kids are able to pay it back. We're just gonna keep on paying it. The trend line for college tuition prices and government involvement in the education system, especially on the collegiate level, is identical.
What does government do well? We forgot to ask
Prop
that.
up capital and prop up big banks.
But then you don't like government. Then we all agree we don't like government.
Like, where are we supposed to shake?
Yeah. If I was not an American and I saw this, I'd be like, wow, they're the dumbest people on the earth. And I am American, and I'm coming to that conclusion. So much BS was put into that last part alone. So I think, even though I'm going to probably do more reactions to these, at least some of these videos, there's no point in having these discussions if people just get to say whatever the hell they want. That was a misinformation fest where it was like communists trying to answer questions and inbred Neanderthals, attempting to defend an ideology they don't understand at all, like in any shape, way, or form. It was nothing but points, reduction, mixing up definitions, getting ahead of conversation, cutting people off, misusing statistics, parroting points, taking the things that the communists say we don't have to listen to, but you have to listen to what I'm saying. There's no way to engage with these things head on in good faith is to hurt yourself. It's like cutting yourself. To engage in these things in good faith is like cutting yourself, because these people aren't, even if they claim they are. And you're playing a game where both sides they're not even thinking they're playing the same game with the same rules. It's completely different. There's no point. You can't have a conversation about ideas if that's how it goes. You have to take a different route. And that's why I'm such an advocate for the way more straight, just saying you don't know what you're talking about, right? And if that happens in conversation, right? Because what are they gonna say, right? Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. It's yeah, you got me good, if you keep your feet planted and you know where you stand for what you do believe in as communists, then these kinds of nonsense shouldn't have to we wouldn't have to uphold anything. But if we have to placate to all of these arguments, we're sitting here to convince these dogs we are trying to convince dogs to vote in their best interest because they're voting against it. At some point you can't just be treating this if you're giving these arguments the time of day, if you're treating them seriously, if you're not properly chastising them, dumping on them, you're hurting yourself. You're hurting our cause. You're doing damage to our movement by these people are stooping so low. They're grasping at straws. These arguments are embarrassingly horrible. Like, I'd be so embarrassed if I was like friends with these. Like, this is so embarrassing, and this will just be totally seen as like, oh, it's a great video, you know. American society is extremely unhealthy. Americans are very, very dumb, very, 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 very dumb, and I'm tired of like having to not say it because they're so fragile. If you know, Chinese people are going to be developing a future, like actually like a futurist society, while America backslides into fascism, while having the infrastructure of an 1850s nation. You know, at some point we don't need to take this. Like, there's no, you know, the American method is not like, you know, courtesy and like intellectual honesty. The American method is like douchebaggery and like bullying and like might makes right ideology. Like, that's the freedom, we're the greatest on earth. Like, nothing about that is material. So if you want to beat that, you have to take it under that strategy to sit there and try to like deal with these things. Like Ty Lopez, like trying to do these gotchas, right? Like Cam coming up with these unbelievable, like Hannah's whitewashing history and definitions. Cam's pulling stuff out of his ass. It's like, you can't say that, right? Because I'm being mean, and we all need to be nice, or what, like whatever. Like you can, you know, it's totally okay to go around spreading misinformation, poisoning the conversation, saying complete nonsense. But if I said someone was stupid, like, that's unacceptable, you know. And as long as we continue, you know, a society can't be intelligent if that's what they value. It's impossible. If a society's focused on freedom and everybody gets their own opinion and everyone's going to do whatever the fuck they want, like, that's anti-intellectual. And of course, if I were to bring that up, well, I don't really think that's anti-intellectual, you know, and then they could just say a bunch of bullshit and like, that's, you know. So, yeah, if anybody watches this and gets convinced to side with capitalism more, like, they have brain damage, and I would suggest you get medical attention. There's no way else to like talk to you or address your opinion. Like, this is getting ridiculous. These are not intellectual opinions. They're brain dead, incestuous arguments made from conservative think tanks to copy and paste for dumbass workers in America to perpetuate. Saying things like slavery, you know, slaves aren't goods, and saying it's offensive that slavery was perpetuated by capitalism. I mean, yeah, yeah. If you like, if there's any of you that like, if you don't think that there's a problem with that, you're a lost cause, and there's no point in addressing you as a human being. Like, this is getting ridiculous. Yeah, this separates me from a lot of other comrades and leftists. Oh, we need to be patient and open-minded, and there's like lots of black revolutionaries, for example, in American history that were killed having a similar ideology. But that's not working, is it? Since when, like, the dictatorship of the proletariat does not start and stop at the concept of the state. We need to start enacting this philosophy in everything we do. And as communists, as we understand, right, like, you can't like wait around to democratically elect communism. Like, there's always going to be these loyalist dogs like supporting this toxic ass system, and they just have to be forcefully overthrown. Yeah, just like there's I could go on and on and on, and it'd be like having a completely different conversation with people that you know, just aren't in reality. So I'm embarrassed to be American. I'm disappointed in the capitalist side. You know, the communists did great as always. You know, we're always, you know, I have nothing to say with the, like, you know, all great arguments from my team as always. Yeah, I'm kind of speechless. I'm really speechless. I'm blown away how stupid these people are. And I'm embarrassed that anybody would look at this and say that like, yeah, this is a real discussion. So, yeah, yeah. And like, last thing, if I can just say, like, you know, if you're like appalled by how mean and cruel I'm being, right? Like, what's the solution? Like, do you think that these arguments work? Do you think people's minds were changed? Like, this is all we're doing, right? We're constantly coming into these conversations with good faith, and like labor aristocrats, like slavery justifiers, right? White supremacists are being like, well, you know, you got this and this, and like, no, man, like, it's to some extent, like to some level, we need to be raising the caliber of these conversations. And when we like just when we open ourselves to as much as possible, right, in attempts to like be open with other people, to help be like, to create this like fluid discussion, right, like we just give people who are idiots, who don't know anything, who are wrong, they can just stomp all over everything, they can just push out BS and BS. Like, these discussions cannot be only intellectual based. Like, there's no way. This is insane. Like, this is insane. It's just insane. Like, focusing on social niceties while being like, yeah, dude, like, slaves like are not goods, and you're being offensive by saying that capitalism is responsible for slavery. I mean, at some point, like, you need to start calling people out. You need to start saying to people that, like, you're full of shit, like, you don't know what you're talking about, you know? And then when they say to you, like, you don't know what you're talking about, it's like they already thought that, man. They're capitalists. They look at communists and like, look at these like poor, disabled minorities or whatever the hell, you know, or like there must be something wrong with Eddie for like that's how they think. Like they think they want to address them organically, but they're incapable of that. They're asleep. They believe in the American dream. They're literally asleep. Yeah, it was like literally just garbage, nonsense for 47 minutes straight. Or, well, yeah, you know what I'm saying. 47 minutes, basically, from all this pro-capitalist side. Like, nothing was convincing, none of it. It's all stuff I've heard before, all stuff I've heard in the past, all stuff any person who does support capitalism, like, will already know and say. And none of the information that you have in your brain about communism will be correct. None of it. Not even a little bit. They don't trust the American government, but they trust everything the American government and corporations have been telling them about communism must be true. They have no motivation to be lying to you at all. I'm a critical thinker and a serious person. Like, you see what I'm like, at some point, like, bullying needs to be included. The degree and level that is, maybe I don't know. Maybe I am going too far. Maybe I am being too cruel. But I'm certainly doing something better than being so open. Like, Malumbo had to, like, moderate and, like, emotionally manage, like, 3 white people having, like, temper tantrums when things weren't going their way. And if we can't, if we're going to talk about, like, reality and honesty and facts, like, we need to talk about honesty and reality and fact. Like, when someone's being an idiot, that's, like, honest and reality. Like, that's not, like, nobody looks at J.D. Vance and it's like, that's a very intelligent, no, he's an idiot, right? Like, you look at Donald Trump, he's an idiot, right? But like Biden, he's like, maybe there are people that are half idiots, right? Like, that's a thing. Like, this is unbelievable, man. We're just all getting let down by this. So with that said, thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Let me know what you think. Let me know what kind of stuff you might want to see. Let me know what you think. I already said that. Whoops. Yeah. Take care. Thanks again for watching. I'm just gonna say it again. Why not? Yeah, and I hope everybody's good. I hope everybody's doing well. Feel free to support me on Patreon or Ko-Fi if you so desire. Like and subscribe if you can and or wish. Yeah, take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.